Hi, and welcome everyone. Welcome to Wisdom of the Mystics. And boy, do we have a very special show for you today. I'm Reverend Kathy Mastroianni, Executive Director of the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, which is truly the keeper of our New Thought wisdom and history. And so it's just such a great honor to be doing this show with Laura Topper here with New Thought Media Network. And we have a very special guest who's bringing in like a very special mystic. And I will pass it over to Laura to share about that. And I think you're on mute, my friend. And we're going to try that again.
My mic is muted. I'm just about to unmute. Yeah, so welcome to Wisdom of the Mystics. And thank you, Reverend Kathy. It's
You're
a good
welcome.
start beginning.
Yes.
And it's great to be here because I just feel so blessed and honored to be woven into this this idea and the consciousness of these broadcasts that we are bringing through every other week here on New Thought Media Network. And yes, today, an amazing guest, super guest, an incredible mystic. And what a blessing for Rev Dr. Toni La Motta to be here presenting the master teacher, Jesus. This is for me just so exciting because Jesus was and is so entwined into our teaching as a metaphysical guide and teacher and expression and example of the Christ consciousness of what our teaching is about, religious science, science of mind, and new thought, that we are unfolding into the knowing of who we are as this Christ consciousness. So Dr. Toni is here as somebody that really understands Jesus. And I know that she's been doing a lot of revisiting for the program today. So it's a blessing to be with her. She said yes to being here. And I'm just going to read from her bio a little because Dr. Toni is an incredible teacher and guide and reverend and speaker. Goes on. I mean, I know from personally, Dr. Toni has taught me the history of New Thought through through Florida campus when I was learning with them for my education for ministerial. And that was just an incredible class. And thank you for the Florida campus for that. That was amazing. And Dr. Toni, what a teacher. And Dr. Toni La Motta is a semi-retired minister for Center for Spiritual Living. She was the founding senior minister for the Sarasota Celebration Center, and she's also served as minister of the Church of Religious Unity in Alpine, California, as a senior minister for the Center of Positive Living in Sarasota. And so before discovering New Thought, she served as a Catholic nun. And I just love this. It's such a rich background and your way of being, Dr. Toni, and what you bring to us right now. And you're a pastoral associate for 16 years. And Dr. Toni's fascinating life journey and her personal is truly inspiring. And she's led to extraordinary depths of compassion and understanding. And her love for ministry and the calling for this is profound. And she is, yes, one of our, she teaches future ministers through the School of Spiritual Leadership. And her experience ranges from teaching high schools, consulting and serving as a trainer with some of the top companies and organizations in the world. So I know that Dr. Toni is waiting in the wings, and I'm excited. Should we bring Dr. Toni on right now? Because I'm excited for you to be here and to be present and to be sharing. Dr. Toni La Motta, welcome to Wisdom of the Mystics today.
Thank you, Kathy and Laura. It's my pleasure to be here today.
And thank you for saying yes to presenting the Master Teacher Jesus and what he has brought to us, to our teachings, and to religion, and to spirituality. And so I'm going to ask you this very first question: who is Jesus?
Well, I think we have to talk about that on several levels. And first of all, Jesus refers to a historical person who lived in first century Galilee. And the interesting thing about Jesus is that even then, he was the great liberator. His parables were constantly looking at how to subvert the day's oppressive social and political structures. And there's been a lot of scientific study on the Bible lately, and he's been newly discovered and seen by so many as a social revolutionary who sought liberation for the oppressed. And one of the people that I have studied is a man named Marcus Borg, who is an American New Testament scholar and theologian and part of the Jesus Seminar. And what Borg said, he said Jesus was a Jewish mystic, a healer, a wisdom teacher, a social prophet, and a movement initiator. And he summarized the view of Jesus in these words. He said he was a spirit person, subversive sage, social prophet, and movement founder who invited his followers and hearers into a transforming relationship with the same spirit that he himself knew, and into a community whose social vision was shaped by the core value of compassion. I think that says it all. But like a lot of other mystical reformers, he was both a prophet and a revolutionary who railed against what was going on with the scribes and Pharisees of his day, the religious leaders of his day. But what I like to think about Jesus is that he includes the best of the preceding Jewish paths, but he also transcends the no longer adequate elements. So he looked at and honored his past, and he honored his whole Jewish tradition. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more as we go on. But he also then went beyond those and said some of these are no longer worth being. I think in that alone, he is someone that we want to model after today. We certainly need something like that in our time today. So how do we do that today is that Jesus not only was a historical person, but Jesus the Christ is still present in a non-physical, maybe we could call it a subtle energy body. And he revealed an awareness of God that we now call the Christ consciousness. I think when we use the word Christ, we're talking about the unification of both the divine, the human, and all of material reality. So I think that's a really important piece. He's not only, the history teaches that there were conflicts over was he divine, was he human? And he not only combined the divine and the human, but all material reality, which again is something that we need in our society today. I read somewhere, and I don't know who quoted this, but it said he was a spirit breath awakened consciousness, which I love. And he not only said that it was present in him, but obviously we'll go on to talk about how it's waiting to be released in every one of us. I like Gene Houston's terms that we're godlings, and that within us is that consciousness waiting to be released. But Jesus actually personified that Christ consciousness. And I often say that while Jesus defines God in particular for Christians, he doesn't confine God for those who see God at work in all spiritual traditions, the way we do in New Thought. So in the Christian path, we might say Jesus is the prototype for the new humanity, modeling what it looks like to both embrace and express both humanity and divinity. So he's a living presence still with us today. I can attest to that in my own experience, just preparing for this workshop today, for this podcast. I found myself not only doing some reading and research again, but just re-falling in love with the Christ, and re-falling in love with that beloved that I first met many, many years ago. And I think that it's an important thing for all of us to recognize that this consciousness is within us right now and is so needed. In addition, and I won't speak a whole lot about this could be another podcast someday, but is the Christ Sophia is something that many people don't talk about. The Sophia is the Greek name for the feminine figure of wisdom in ancient Judaism. And many early Christians used to talk about Christ as both the Logos, the Word, and the Wisdom, Sophia. So we're including both Christ and Sophia in that name. And that is to restore the divine feminine in our world today, which I believe is another aspect of what Jesus himself was doing. When we look at the early teachings of Jesus and his love and support of the women of the day. We can go on about Mary Magdalene, and so many others, but the Christ Sophia represents that. So for me, when I even ask the question, who is Jesus? Like, oh my glory, how do I answer that? He's a person that walked this face of the earth and did amazing things, but he continues to do those things. He and she, as we look at the Sophia wisdom in us. So hopefully that answers at least basically who Jesus is.
Oh,
No, thank you. I love the multidimensional
yes.
aspect of Jesus that you shared. I just think that's so beautiful and helpful for people to understand, because I think a lot of the traditional teachings are very literal, in the Bible and stuff. And I love in our New Thought teaching how Jesus is the great example of what we can all be versus the exception, on a pedestal. And, and just for me personally, as I shared earlier, was, I came from the philosophy of the scary Bible, where we're going to hell and stuff. And this New Thought teaching just helped me open my heart in a whole new way to embody Jesus and to really welcome him as her, into my heart as that Christ consciousness and that light. And so thank you for sharing that. And so we're kind of wondering, how is he a mystic? How is Jesus a mystic?
Well, I haven't been listening to all your podcasts. I'll go back to them, but I define mystics strictly as one who realizes their union with God. So, and one who has, for Jesus, it was an experiential reality, not simply an element of belief. And one of the things in one of the classes I teach on rituals, it's like all about experience. And I think that's something that we need even more of in our time. And so what I'd like to talk about as a mystic is that Jesus talked three ways. He talked about God, he talked to God, and he talked as God. And all of those ways are things that we can emulate. So the first one is what I call the infinite face of God, the God beyond us, the transcendent, the mystery that, when we say God, the God that can be named is not the God. We don't know. I realized Jesus, if you study scripture at all, you can see that he actually saw God in all three of these ways. First of all, the transcendent. He reflected about God. In John's gospel, it says he, you know, he sees the Father, and whatever he does, the Son does in like manner. And in Matthew, he says, God sends the rain on the just and the unjust, or the parable of consider the birds of the air, your Father cares for them. He talked about God that way. And Moses in the burning bush, and the God of your ancestors sent me. I am that I am, meaning God that is pure being, or the infinite being, or even being itself. I also did some research on the letters Yahweh. YHWH is the way it's often written, is the Lord, or the I am existence, the very being. I think that even when you look at all of creation, it speaks of complete infinity. It's beyond us. I love Meister Eckhart, and I prayed God to rid me of God. I love that. And I prayed God to rid me of God. So many of us have been raised with such wrong notions of who God is. And the God that is beyond all of our understanding. I think it was Augustine who said, if you can comprehend God, it's not God. So Jesus lived that. He was a very active Jew of his time. And so he would have studied and read the Psalms. The God of the Psalms says, if you go to the heavens, I am there. If you go down to Sheol, I am there. God was ever present, and the God was creation. The God created the heavens and earth. God had no beginning and no end. I really can imagine that Jesus, as he was growing up, was studying all the Jewish traditions. And in the Jewish tradition, there was a great deal about this big God. Who is he? What is he? And I know we do understand that in New Thought. We understand that there's a ground of our being, that the thing itself, Ernest Holmes said. I think all of that is that transcendent God that Jesus clearly knew. The other thing he knew was the intimate face of God. And the intimate face of God is the God that's close to us. And this is something that I believe New Thought churches have been missing, I'm going to say. I remember when I first came into ministry, people used to come into my church and say, I miss talking to Jesus. Can I do that? I know that you pray as God, and I love that. But what about talking to God? And if you look at Jesus's life, all through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all report that Jesus journeyed into the wilderness. He underwent a period of solitude and fasting and the mystical. He also had visions. Many times it talked about each of those things happening. So the mystical experience was very present in his life as someone who was intimate God. And Luke especially emphasizes the role of prayer in Jesus' life. And he would say Jesus entered into a time going to the hills to pray. And I think that these long hours in solitude, in which his mind is stilled and heart was directed, were part of the Jewish tradition in which Jesus lived. So, if we want to understand who he was, we need to understand how he lived in that time and what people thought and believed. And he didn't just come and say, throw this all out. He honored his tradition. And, I think right in the beginning, Luke also says, Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. I also think at the end of his life, when we hear, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you if you can let this cup pass from me. He was beseeching God. He was begging God. We were taught to stop begging God. And yet here it is, Jesus himself begging his Father for help. He called God Abba if you translate, I had the fortune of studying at a Catholic seminary many years ago, and we literally had a Greek dictionary that we had to look up different words. And the word Abba itself means both father and mother. I think that is something that most people don't recognize and realize, and saying, oh, he called God male and therefore God is male. But in that day, it represented both father and mother. The other thing that may sound a little startling is that Jesus had spiritual guides and companions that he prayed to. I think that's something that many of the mystics will talk about. Most of them, for most of the mystics, it was Jesus who was their spiritual companion. And I just finished reading a book that I love, Teresa of Avila and Julianne of Norwich, and Julianne talking about, then I saw this, and then I saw this. And she saw these visions all the time. And Jesus had those visions. I think the main one we hear about is at the Transfiguration. He called Moses and Elijah. And he said, I need your help right now. Can you come and help me? And so I think there's something to be learned from that, but it's also to recognize that Jesus lived between the two worlds. He knew how to communicate not only with father or mother, he also communicated with all of his best friends. And he was able to, and then he also recognized in the people around him. He saw them. He took these God-forsaken fishermen that looked like they were nobody, but he saw something in every single one of them. And that's the other point of a mystic. The mystics all see the divine in other people. And Jesus clearly saw that. He saw beyond the physical appearance. He saw beyond the status quo, if you will. So I like to think of, there are three faces of God. We talked about two of them, the infinite face, the intimate face, and then there's also the inner face. So the one that New Thoughts, I think, is missing is the intimate face. We're very good at the transcendent. We're also pretty good at the inner face of God. We recognize when Jesus said, God and I are one. And I love the passage that says, is it not written in your law that I said you are gods, you're children of the Most High, all of you? And, and during his time, they accused him of blasphemy. He said, he's saying he's God. What is he saying? And he never said, I'm the only one that is God. If you read the passages very clearly, he talked about all of us as a Father in me and I am in you. May we be one. And we're all made, and over, right from the beginning of the Old Testament, it says we're made in the image and likeness of God. And I once heard, and this always made me laugh, but children of sheep are sheep. Children of elephants are elephants. Children of humans are humans. So children of God must be fill in the blank. All right. So that's part of what Jesus knew, that he wasn't the only Son of God. In fact, one time in class way back when, someone taught us this translation does not say he's the only Son of God. It says he's the Son of the only God. Very big difference. And so the interface of God is saying, not only am I, but all of you are as well. Hope that makes some sense.
It's so interesting and so deep, and it feels as if there are even more layers to what you're saying. There's even more depth. I'm really interested as you're talking. I'm just miracles and how they came about. I mean, I know as I study the Bible, and from a metaphysical perspective, look more deeply at the underlying of what's going on in the text there. And for many people, the miracles would seem as if this is impossible, and Jesus had the ability to do this, and I can't do this. I'd really love it if you could talk on that.
Yeah, it's good. I think that his main teaching, just what I was saying, like right from the Psalms, I think it was the 82nd Psalm, something like that. Isn't it written in your laws, you are God's? And the interesting piece of this also is it said most people translate the Son of God, but in Greek, it just says a Son of God. You know, it's so fascinating how interpretation has come down through. You don't even have to have a metaphysical
Yes.
interpretation. You just have to have the correct translation of the
Yeah.
original. So, right from the beginning, his main teaching were we are manifestations of the divine. That's the good news. You know, it's like people ask, what did he come to teach? Well, the good news. And he said, I and the Father are one. I love that part of John's gospel. And that they may be one as you and I, Father, are one. And I think that it's so important that religion is not about Jesus. It's the religion of Jesus that we're looking at. We're looking at what did he know that he's teaching us? And so he's all of the above. And he's both the infinite, the intimate, and the inner. And so are we. I think that that's the amazing part. Um, we can say that this is who Jesus is for us. And we don't have to say God is only known in Jesus. God is known as Kathy. God is known in Laura. And when I want to know who God is, I look around me. God is known in the chair that I'm sitting in. And Jesus understood
Yeah.
that in a way that I think I'm only beginning to. I would hope scratching the surface. And you know, he also said, I am the way. And people often interpreted that to mean Jesus is the way. But I am stands for the divine in
Mm.
each of us. Who
Yeah.
am I? I am. It's the Ruach Anadai, I think it's called. The Spirit of the Lord is upon you. The kingdom of God is within you. Only a mystic could have said that. A mystic that engages in direct experiences, because the mainstream religion says that mainstream religion is different from mysticism, because mainstream says the key to salvation, mysticism says the key to salvation is to raise our state of consciousness. And the key to salvation is found within ourselves. It's not something that has to happen from the outside. And I think that most religions, unfortunately, teach that the key to salvation is found outside in an external church or following Jesus. That's not what he meant by any means. He came saying, who I am, you are, all over and over. And I love the saying, one of my favorite passages in the Bible, where he says, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. And I think, unfortunately, Kathy, so many people have had the experience you did, where it was hellfire and brimstone and everything you did wrong. And they have to just look at Jesus's life. He never once condemned. It's just he was here loving. And then having life more abundantly doesn't mean that you'll always have everything you want and you'll have all the money. And I think that we get sometimes caught up in that and think I can, if I learn how to do treatment the right way, I can have anything I want. Well, I think that that's a misrepresentation of if I learn how to do treatment, I can change who I am to recognize I already have everything I ever could need or want. And that sometimes what I think I need and want, when it shows up, I say, oh my God, what have I done? I used to love when somebody came and said, I met this man. Can you pray that he, proposes to me? And I'm like, no way. Be careful what you ask for. Abundant life that he said meant the life of God itself. That's what he's talking about. And I recently took a workshop with Andrew Harvey. I don't know if you know his work at all, but he is a mystic of today, just beautiful teacher. And he got me riled because Andrew Harvey speaks with a passion that I don't feel and I want. I think that when he speaks, it's like absolutely exuberance. And when I first heard it, I was almost put back by it. And then I discovered he was actually transmitting Christ's energy as he spoke. So I didn't always understand his words, but boy, did it make a difference. And it came into me in a way that I hope that I can do for others. That's what I pray, to be a transmitter of that energy. And the course was called the Jesus Path. And this is a direct quote from Andrew Harvey. It says, he says you'll do greater things than I did. Somebody is saying to us, you don't yet know or even can imagine how amazing you really are. But I know, and I'm going to help you find it if it kills me. And by the way, it did. But I also resurrected. Oh, amazing, isn't it? I just love it.
I love that too. Wow.
Yeah, Andrew Harvey has a flair that really touches your soul, and I just think, when we say the teachings of Jesus, probably what the first thing comes to most people's mind, I remember the catechism. What did Jesus come to teach? Love one another as I have loved you. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that we can never say that God is only known in Jesus, but this is who Jesus is for us. Total transcendence and total immanence. Those two words are worth pondering. I've done a lot of my own meditation, just reflecting. What does it mean to be transcendent? What does it mean to be immanent, to be embodied, to live in this very body as the Christ? And that's how God is revealed. And God is revealed in a way that is both completely human and completely divine. It's something that I think we can talk about a lot about. There's a whole lot of trying to understand in my own being what that means. At moments when I'm feeling the most human doesn't mean I'm not being divine as well. The divine encompasses all of it. Total transcendence, total immanence. God is revealed, and being known as completely human and completely divine, just as Jesus was. And that's the other thing that he really came to teach, is how to be. I think he came to teach us how to be human. We are already divine, and we don't know how to be human. I think that, loving one another is not something that comes naturally to everybody. And so for me, the greatest lesson that I'm learning from Jesus right now is how to live in my body and be totally, fully human. Instead of trying to spiritual bypass and like all is well and all is fine all the time, it's like it hurts. And Jesus hurt. Jesus knew how to be angry. He knew how to suffer. And I think that's a gift that he gave to us. Phew. Let me stop for a second.
Oh, yes. Let's have just a moment to embody all of this and this information and this consciousness as a gift right now. Thank you so much, Dr. Toni, for being here and for sharing. It's so powerful. And watching right now, you are here with the incredible Dr. Toni La Motta and myself and Reverend Kathy, and learning about Jesus, what we don't read in the books, what is between the pages in the Bible. And I wasn't brought up with the Bible. My family of origin are Jewish. And so that was a whole piece. The New Testament didn't exist in my upbringing at all. I discovered Jesus through New Thought, through Science of Mind, and learning to love what this wonderful individual for and stands for beyond the religion, and working on my own Jesus and accepting the teachings of Jesus beyond the Jewish religion. And it's been a beautiful journey for me, because it's allowed me to dive more deeply into Judaism and to understand the religion that I walked away from when I was 18 because of it. So it and I love the beginning you said he's a social prophet, a social reformer and revolutionary. And in a way, our teaching has kind of squashed that a little bit, I feel, where we have to be love and light and rainbows and flowers and spiritual bypass. And right now, I think we're really being called to kind of really shine out and stand up and be an example of that, and be that have that social conscience and do that, stand forwards, even if there's a resistance towards that.
Absolutely.
Because that's what's going to make the change. And that's what he did.
Exactly. I wanted to quote another thing from Andrew Harvey, because I just finished the class, so I'm filled with his energy right now as well. And it said, that consciousness will rise and a new human race will be born through the birth canal of the dark night, through the grace of the Christ consciousness. Just as through the crucifixion, Jesus was born forever in the resurrection. What is this message of the Christ consciousness? The message of becoming the dancer, someone who in your heart, mind, soul, and body is so alive with divine trust, divine hope, divine compassion, divine illumination, that you're given by grace the ability to dance with the two unprecedentedly extreme opposites that are now manifesting in our world at this very moment. What Jesus and the cosmic Christ are calling all of us to realize in ourselves, and for each other, is that we are nothing less than the divine, empowered, embodied human children of the Father, Mother, the absolute and embodied Godhead. We're being called at this moment when everything is threatened and fragile and hanging by a burning thread, not to despair, not to be paralyzed, not to grow hopeless, not to give up.
Wow. That's
I can meditate
beautiful.
on that one for a long time. It's like, how do we live with the pain of what's happening in our world today, at the same time knowing that consciousness is birthing something new? I used to study with Barbara Marx Hubbard, and she always said, our crisis is our birth. And I think of that so much today. And I thought of that all through Andrew Harvey's teaching. There is no resurrection without first having death, and all we're experiencing right now. And there is no transformation or awakening without a dark night. In fact, most teachings say we go through at least two of them through our lives. And what we're going through globally is the dark night right now. We're experiencing the collapse of what looks like human reality. And the way to get through it is not to bypass it, but to totally embrace it and be there I love the metaphor of the dance. Be the dancer who can dance through both of those things. And to me, that's like, that makes Jesus' teaching very relevant for today, very practical. He's like, right here, right now, this is who we need to be.
Wow, I so appreciate that. And I love what you had said about that we're already divine and we're learning how to be human. And so everything that you are saying and is sharing, again, is so useful for us, as we all learn how to be human. And, and in our New Thought teaching, to not do that spiritual bypass, but to learn how to be in and within that not dark night of the soul, to me, it's kind of going within and finding that love, it's just finding that love within, to go like Jesus went to the mountain and Jesus went into prayer to commune with the divine. So often it was like the challenges that happened, he would go to the mountain, as they would say. And for each one of us to use that example for our own lives, to really to just be with it with compassion and love for ourselves, that we're doing our best, and we can to tune into that Christ consciousness within us, that the wisdom is within us. And so I appreciate what you're sharing with us.
Yeah, and then he went from the mountain to serve. He went right out to heal the sick, to to comfort those who were in distress. So he was very socially active in his own day. And I think he's calling us to be the both and constantly. And to remember, I think I love the passage where he said, "What I have done, you'll do an even greater." And I think we forget that. We think, oh, that was one thing. Jesus could do that. I really want to be part of a group that knows that we can raise the dead. I remember I studied with Kathy Hearn early in my career as a religious science minister. And Kathy used to say all the time, "I want to raise the dead, and I haven't yet done it." And I've never forgotten that. And I do too. I just know that, I had my own experience recently. I had a very weird experience where I think I was having a reaction to medication, but I started having seizures, and they were very frightening. I just would lose consciousness. And I went to a couple of people who just knew with me that this could evaporate. And within 2 days of praying together, it just totally disappeared. And I was kind of startled and not. And I'm like, why are you surprised? Isn't this what this is about? Don't we know? Don't we yet believe? And I guess, I love the teaching of, it's a teaching that comes from a man named Paul Smith, who is a former Baptist minister of all things. He's one of my greatest teachers. And he's the one that wrote the book about the three faces of God that just opened my eyes to see it a new way. And to me, people want to learn how to live like Jesus. Ask yourself the question, is my God big enough? Like, can God do this? I know I find myself sometimes praying for little things and say, wait a minute, it could be a lot bigger. We could change the world. Is my God big enough? I, for a while, was doing some talking in an organization here in Sarasota called the Cosmic Center. And they were all into ascended masters and light rays, and not something that I was really comfortable with. And then I went to one of the workshops. They had a channeler who talked about things that I had never heard, but my heart opened, and I walked away from there saying, I don't think my God's big enough. I don't have a cosmic view like they do. Not that I'm going to go join them. I mean, I love my own teaching, and yet there was more. And then, is my God close enough? What is my relationship with Jesus, with my own spiritual guides? And I've learned a great deal. I've studied spiritual guides now and studied how to get really in touch with those messages that are coming to me all the time, that my own intuition, if you will, but fostered by all the spiritual helps, the communion of saints, if you will, or the collection of angels and the guides that are out there. That's not something I know we talk about in New Thought. I would almost not pass my practitioner panel saying something like that, but I'm saying it now. Is your God close enough? Do we recognize the thinness of the veil and how much we can communicate with the other side? Really important pieces. And I'm not saying that we should go out and become mediums necessarily, but I'm also saying that we need to be open to that connection that can be there. And then that last part, is your God you enough? Well, I think that we do believe that God is within us, but I ask myself, do I really believe that I am divine? I ask myself that every morning. And when I pray, when I meditate, I want to be open, because to me, that's what awakening is about. That's what really evolution is about, is to really, truly live, not as if, but live knowing that who I am is divine as well as human. Really powerful. It's I know my aim in life at this point is to say, I'm not there yet. I get it. I understand it intellectually, but I want to experience it more. I really, I'm learning more and more myself what it means to be a mystic. I call myself a mystic, and I know that there's more. There's so much more that I can grow. Now.
And as I'm looking at you here, Dr. Toni, next to the image of Jesus and his aura and your aura, I can see your aura just expanding. And I really just, it's really in my heart to say, because Jesus did go out there. He was with the people. He wasn't a secret hidden away somewhere trying to be separate from. He saw himself as part of the solution to helping people on a very personal level and on a collective level. And what an incredible thing that 2,000 years or 2,000 years later, we're here talking about this person. That for me is just incredible, that we're here talking about somebody that managed to create such a ripple that is infinite. And so we have a lot to learn from this teaching.
Yeah, and I recommend, talking to Jesus. When was the last time you had a conversation with Jesus? And I'll say that to all of our listeners today. One of the things I like to do is I teach a process of journaling known as the intensive journal. And one of the things that we do in that class is to talk to some teacher of ours, the master teacher, and for many people it is Jesus, and to literally have a written conversation. And it's amazing what shows up. And in fact, I know I did that preparing for today. What do you want said? What is it, so that it is not just my voice, that there is a conversation going on. And I wear an Apple Watch. You can't see it here, but I have a picture of Jesus here to remind me every time I look at my watch, I can see his face. And it just recalls me to say, are you living that? Are you there right now? And sometimes I call out, help me. And sometimes I can speak in the knowing. It's like, it's a both and again. So getting to know that, I think that one of the things people can do is get to know Jesus, and the way to do it is to ask him. He loves it. He loves it when somebody says, I want to know you. He'll show you. I have a friend, I mentioned Paul Smith, again, when Paul talks to us, he often sees our guides around us, and he'll say, oh, Jesus is with you. One day when I was talking to him, he said, hey, Tony, Joel Goldsmith and Ernest Holmes are right here with you right now. I mean, that was so powerful, really powerful. And wow. And so when I'm teaching History of New Thought, I certainly call upon them and saying, hey, teach this class with me. I can't do this alone. And I know that sounds really different. Right. And I look at, my own background. I'm a religious science and beyond. So I think that all of us, and I really take Ernest Holmes literally when he said open at the top. And to me, these are teachings that are opening me to go deeper, learning embodiment practices. I literally took a workshop on embodiment recently. And one of the things that I'm involved in is a group that does movement and dance, sometimes just from a chair, just as part of our spiritual practice. There's a practice that I also do called Whole Body Mystical Awakening. Laura knows I did it on one of her podcasts one day. And it's just a prayer to be centered in our total body and to listen to both what our hearts are saying, our guts are saying, our feet are saying, our head is saying, to speak. It's somewhat like the visioning process that Michael Beckwith taught us, but it's a very practical way like getting really in touch with the wisdom right within us, which is pretty powerful. So I could go on a lot about that as well. I think our time might be coming to a close. So
I think we're right on. So
Yes.
thank you. And that's actually one of our questions was practical applications for people today. So I think what you just shared was so beautiful and perfect to give people ideas, more than the Bible. And, and I love Ernest Holmes. He has a whole section in my well-loved Science Mind textbook called From the Teachings of Jesus. And so I think it's really neat to see how Ernest interprets, the Christ consciousness and the Christ teaching, and I think we even said earlier, he just really utilized it in the teaching of Science Mind, and more. He went to all the mystical teachings, but he loved Jesus. He really did. I think he probably did do your journaling exercises and communed and talked to Jesus, if I could assume. He had a deep connection with that teaching, which is why it's, again, so wonderful to have you here on our show today.
Well,
what resources would you share with our viewers?
Yes.
So if they want to learn more about?
Well, a couple of things. One of the organizations that I'm very involved in these days is called the Integral Christian Network. So it's integralchristiannetwork.org. And you will find there many of our Science of Mind and Unity ministers are involved in it. It's the teaching that we know and love, and then some, is the way I describe it. And that's where I've learned the whole body mystical awakening and some of the embodiment practices. There also, Andrew Harvey, I've mentioned him a couple of times today. The Shift Network has a couple of his courses. One of them is a course with he and Matthew Fox. I mean, you want to get two incredible teachers together, or even just reading his book called this. He has several books, but the one that I think really embodies the Jesus teaching is called The Son of Man. And by the way, I really believe, I'm not positive that this is what he would say, but he said, so often we talk about the Son of God, but Jesus came, as I mentioned, to teach us to be human. He's a son of man, more than even the Son of God. We're all sons of God. So I'm loving the book. I'm only partly through it right now, but I highly recommend that. There's another teacher that I love work called Richard Rohr. He's a Roman Catholic priest. See, I haven't given up all of my roots and background. In fact, one of the things that I am finding is that the richness of what has been part of you heard a little bit of my history. I have quite a rich past in history. And what I'm doing today, I threw some of it out for years. When I came into religious science, I kind of threw out everything else and said, okay, I'm now a religious scientist. And what I've learned is I am that and. And so what I've done is incorporate. I studied in India with an Indian guru for a while and spent 21 days on retreat. And some of those practices, the chanting and the things that we did, are really opening. Anything that can open our hearts. So the conversations, the journaling, but also just sit down and try to have a conversation with Jesus, or asking for your guides. If you want some help, you can come to my website, and I teach classes on that now as well. But any kind of mystical practice, I think just even studying the mystics I'm so delighted that you're doing this series, because it just opens us to what's possible. These are not people who had extraordinary experiences. These are people who had what can be ordinary experiences for all of us. And I think just even allowing, I know an awful lot of people wouldn't call themselves mystics. What if we called ourselves mystics and open to what that meant? I wonder how that would change us. I think
what a powerful idea to affirm it and know it now. And
I wrote a blog post.
That's so transformational.
I wrote a blog post that was probably one of the most read of my blog posts because I labeled it, "I'm coming out of the closet." And I didn't mean what it normally meant. So I said, I am claiming myself as mystic. And I got a lot of response to that, as you can imagine. But I really believe that, like, saying that in the first place just opened me to new experiences. And no, I don't have the same things as Juliana of Norwich. I don't look like Hildegard of Bingham. I don't sing those kinds of things. But I'm now looking at my life and all the experiences that I continue to have even to today. And, I am living that mystical life, and I'm living much more than I've ever lived before. And there's more. That's the exciting part for me. It's like, I'm going to say this loud on the broadcast. I'm 76 years old. I thought I was finished. All right, I've done it all. I've run 3 churches. I've done all these things in my life.
You're just getting started.
I'm just getting started. You got it. There's so much more. And really tapping into this whole mystical approach and coming to know the Christ consciousness in a deeper way, and has just been it's an exciting time of life. So thank you for having me do this, because it literally reopened something in me that has been dormant for a while. So I'm grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know we've all enjoyed it, and I'm certain everyone who is watching is enjoying this as well. And I'm grateful for the resources to know that you do classes, and that the books that you shared with us, again, I'm certain this has ignited within people this curiosity. And it's like, wow, who is this guy named Jesus? And how can we embody and utilize it as humans here on this planet today? Revealing peace and love.
The world needs us right now.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Toni, for saying yes to this and for coming and shining the light and sharing so much more deeply about Jesus as a person, as a being, and as a transformation idea for all of us, to open up to being that mystic that we already are. I just love that. If we all claimed it right now, I think life would just change instantly, because our whole perception would just open up to the possibilities. And I want to thank you here, and people can reach you at your website. I know TonyLaMotta.com. You have many amazing offerings there, and your teachings and events and classes are all there. And of course, you're on Facebook also, aren't you, Dr. Toni?
Yes, I am. Just under Tony La Motta.
Find you on Facebook. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody that's been here watching. And you can send your questions, Dr. Toni. I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions, Dr. Toni, coming through about you and about Jesus. So thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting New Thought Media Network and all the work that we do in the world every single day to bring broadcasts and shows and programs to educate and illuminate us to knowing the truth of who we really, truly, truly are. So I'm going to put the donate link up here. If this has moved you and you donate and be woven into the consciousness of the vision of the network, then there is the donate button. It's in a link underneath this video. And thank you, Kathy, Reverend Kathy, for all that you are. It's such a joy being with you on Wisdom of the Mystics.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's always a joy to be with you. And I just learned so much from these shows. And I just encourage people to look back at our other videos of our other mystics that we've talked about and those that are coming forth. As the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, we are truly here to preserve, protect, and present science, mind, philosophy, and wisdom. Because it really, if you're around, if you have, I know it touched and changed my life. And so what a blessing to be like Jesus, to go out to the world, to touch and change others' lives, and to really come off the mountain. Actually, I live on the side of a mountain, and to do the work in the world. I think it's very inspiring what we've learned today. So again, thank you, Dr. Toni, and thank you everyone who's here for your calling and for your inner listening and for what you are doing for the world. To listen to your divine calling and to be a better human, to be, a divine human here on this planet and help uplift the planet as a whole. So we're grateful for you.
I can just say one more word that also came from Andrew Harvey. He ended his last seminar by saying, "Where is your heartbreak?" And look at what is breaking your heart today, and that's what you're being called to. I just think that's a very powerful message to say, what is mine to do? Well, what's breaking my heart? Because that's what I'm being called to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you both for answering your calls.
Thank you, Dr. Toni. Oh,
Thank you.
and thank you to everyone for being here and being present. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time with our next super guest and our next mystic. And thank you so much, Dr. Toni LaMotta, for being who you are and for being here today.
Thank you.
Bye for now, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.